following video may contain scenes of violence and nudity. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk about three different stories: Genesis, Metamorphosis, and Metamorphoses. The first Metamorphosis is the one that came out in 2014. It's a French film, and it is very bizarre, but you need to understand the second story, which came out in the year 7 AD, written by the Roman poet Ovid, to understand the first. And if you use Genesis to compare the two, then you have a holistic understanding of all three of them. So today I want to talk about all three of them, but specifically to understand Metamorphosis, which came out in 2014. But before we go into that, you need to have a little bit of background information. The two main characters in the scene that I will be analyzing are Diana and Actaeon. Diana is the goddess of the hunt. She's also a goddess of virginity. And Actaeon is the son of Cadmus. He's this Greek guy. You don't need to worry about that. But in the story, he is a hunter. In Ovid's telling of Metamorphosis, which came out in the year 7 AD, there is something that is distinctly unique to it, which does not appear in Genesis or in the 2014 telling of the film. So the myth from Ovid goes basically like this. There's a young hunter, his name is Actaeon, and he spent the morning hunting when it starts to get really warm. So he tells all of his men to go home for the day. He strays with aimless steps in the forest, and he comes upon this relaxing spring with an arch in a grove of cypress and pine trees. And it is there where he finds Diana and her nymphs bathing. They are naked. And then Actaeon stumbles upon this scene, and he sees them all naked, and the nymphs are enraged, and that they see that the guy is seeing Diana naked. So they crowd around her, but she's too tall. She's taller. Diana is taller than all of them, and so Actaeon can still see the naked Diana. And Diana gets upset. So she reaches for a bow and arrow so she can shoot Actaeon, but they are out of reach. So what she does instead is she takes some water, she throws it at him, and she says, "Now you may tell, if you can tell, that is, of having seen me naked." Stag horns grow from Actaeon's head immediately, and he also becomes afraid. So he charges away, and the rest of his body changes as well. And the only thing that doesn't change is his mind. And then Actaeon realizes that he has become a stag, because he looks into a puddle of water and he sees himself as a stag. And then he's faced with a dilemma. Should I go home, or should I stay in the forest? But he doesn't get to decide in the end, because his hunting dogs, find him, and they kill him, while his partners call his name, not realizing that it's their friend who is dying in front of their eyes. So a pretty grim story, if you ask me. The myth from the 2014 Metamorphosis is a bit different. The thing that you have to keep in mind when watching the clip, there are two things. The first thing is that Ovid's Metamorphosis, what he was doing was he was retelling Greek myths to take into account the Roman social situation at the time. And because that is the case, we can safely assume that the producers of this film are doing the same thing with modern-day France that Ovid did with Greece and Rome. The other thing that you have to remember while watching the clip is to keep an eye out for any genital aberrations that you may see. Here's the clip. Now that you have seen the two, I want to go over two differences between the movie and the book, and then I would like to tell you what I think the differences mean. The first difference that the film presents is that they put the story of Actaeon and Diana at the beginning of the film, whereas in Ovid's Metamorphoses, he puts it in book 3. So Ovid's Metamorphoses is a huge set of stories that he's compiled, and I think there are like 12 or 13 books. And the story of Actaeon and Diana happens in book 3, whereas in the movie it happens right at the beginning. And the reason I think that the producers did this is because they want us to compare it with Genesis. If you look at Genesis and you compare it with the story, you can see that there are parallels that are very eerie. In Genesis, the fruit, Eve is told to not eat from the fruit of good and evil, from the tree of good and evil, because she will die. And I think what that means is that she will die. But what actually happens is she becomes aware of her vulnerabilities when she eats the fruit, and so does her husband, Adam. Both of them become aware of their vulnerabilities after eating the fruit, and so it's self-consciousness. The fruit gives them self-consciousness, and what that means is they are aware of their vulnerabilities, and what that means is they know that they can be hurt. And the reason why it is the tree of knowledge of good and evil is because to hurt someone else, to commit evil, means you have to exploit their vulnerabilities self-consciously. So to know where someone else hurts, where someone else is vulnerable, means you know where you are vulnerable. So in Genesis, Adam becomes self-conscious because he is judged by Eve. Eve gives Adam the fruit, and the reason for that is because, two reasons. Historically, a long time back, it was women who did the berry and fruit picking, and it was men who went out for the hunt for many weeks. And the second reason is because women judge men, and there's nothing more paralyzing than being rejected by a woman. They are the supreme judges of time and space because they decide whose genetic material is worthy to pass on in time and space and whose genetic material is not worthy. And so for that reason, women make men very self-conscious. I have a friend, for example, she was on the bus and this guy started asking her out and being very friendly with her, and she said, "No, shut up, go away." And then he got very upset with her and started yelling at her, and so I think she kicked him because they were on the bus and he started advancing towards her. And then he got very upset and he was asked to leave the bus, which he did, thankfully. And that goes to show that just a few words from a woman have immense power over men. And that's because women are very judgmental, and they're very powerful in that sense because they decide what goes on and what doesn't. They are nature. They select. They choose in a Darwinian sense. And the second, another example I have is I was on the bus on the number 8 in Rutland when this guy, he was middle-aged and he seemed like a construction guy, a really rough guy. He sat in front of me and he took out his phone and he had this bikini model as his wallpaper. When I saw that, I thought it was really weird. Because something like that you usually shed after you leave junior high school. But this guy seemed to have it, and it took me a while to figure out why. But I realized then what that photo meant to him. To him, it was a goddess. He was worshipping her because it's proof that men will work hard for the smile of a woman, so to speak. They want to be approved by women so that they can pass on their genetics, and that's why he had that photo of that bikini model on his phone. It was because he wanted her to judge him. And that's, I guess, the reason why he worked hard and so on and so forth. Now that I've gone over what Genesis means, I want to go over how Metamorphosis is a mirror of Genesis. The reason why Metamorphosis is, specifically the scene with Actaeon and Diana, is a mirror of Genesis is because in Genesis, the woman makes man uncomfortable, whereas in Metamorphosis, it's the man who makes woman uncomfortable. And that's, in Genesis, the reason why they become self-conscious is because they become aware of their vulnerabilities. It's the same thing in Metamorphosis. Diana becomes aware of her vulnerabilities. And of course, Diana is a category for women. She is the goddess of virginity. And so I think where women feel vulnerable is in the dark while walking outside with men or a man behind you. Definitely, you are afraid of rape perpetually as a woman, and it is something that you grow up with, and it is something that stays with you for the rest of your life. And that's when men make women feel vulnerable and self-conscious. So, the second point that I have to make is the symbolism of a deer hunt. Historically, and in art, a deer hunt has been one of the longest symbols for the hunt and pursuit of a woman. If you see a painting with a guy chasing a doe, it often represents the chase of the guy chasing a girl. And I think this comes into play in the scene. Because Diana turns Actaeon into a stag, she has this whole act of revenge because Actaeon, the man, turns Diana, the woman, self-conscious. As I explained earlier on, this comes from the fear of rape. And rape, in a sense, is a sexual act. It's the guy chasing the girl. It's the hunter pursuing the deer. And Diana, she flips this around. She turns Actaeon into the deer. She turns the hunter into the hunted. And what happens as a consequence of that is the hunted is killed by his friends. And this is the work of supreme irony on behalf of the gods, because usually the victimizer never expects to be the victim. And here what we have is Diana, who is the goddess of virginity, turning the tables against Actaeon when she turns him into the thing that he would have turned her into. So that's the reason why the scene with Actaeon and Diana is a mirror of Genesis. In Metamorphoses, in the scene with Actaeon and Diana, it is the man who turns the woman self-conscious and vulnerable, and aware of vulnerabilities. And then Diana takes revenge, I guess on behalf of all women, against the perpetual fear that they have of rape. Now, finally, the takeaway that I have of this is this. If a society is unaware of its marginalized members, then it'll self-destruct. I asked you to look out for in the movie was any genital differences, uniquenesses in any of the characters, and I think you might have seen that. The character Diana in the movie had male genitals. That was bizarre, but she had the body of a female, except for her crotch. And I think what this stands for is the marginalized and the uncategorizable. We are used to having two binaries, male and female, masculine and feminine. And a character like Diana, or any transgender or she-male character, doesn't fit neatly into any of those two characters, into any of those two binaries. And I think what that symbolizes is the marginalized in society, the ones who are left at the corners, at the edges, because they don't fit neatly into the system. So Diana stands for the marginalized. Actaeon, I think, stands for society, specifically upper class society. I don't know of anyone who goes hunting with dogs and a partner anymore. The only person I do know who does that are aristocrats from the United Kingdom, when I saw documentaries about them. Specifically, Prince Charles in a movie about how when Diana died, he went and took the boys for a hunt, and they go chase a stag. And it's the same thing. I think that Actaeon stands for upper class society in this French film, in the 2014 version, because it's so rare to see someone hunting, even though the producers are retelling the story from Ovid. So then what happens? Actaeon is killed by his partner who can't recognize him, which is, as I said in my second point, the most tragic of tragedies, because, of course, in a sense it's betrayal, but it's ignorant betrayal because you don't know the person you're attacking. And if you can't recognize the person you're attacking, then who's to say who's your friend as well? And so the reason why Actaeon's hunting partners and dogs kill him is because he looked at the vulnerable member of society for the first time. He gained knowledge which he didn't have before, which was sort of forbidden to him as well, probably because he was never allowed to see it before. And so I think what that means is that when someone from society looks at the marginalized for the first time, or if they're exposed too much, then they will self-destruct, probably because society lives and thrives on binaries and systems and categories, And if you have something that exists outside of the category, you cannot take that into account without destroying the system of categories themselves. And for that reason, I think that those three different things, Diana is the marginalized, Actaeon is representative of upper class society, and 3, Actaeon is killed by his partner who can't recognize him. That's why I think that if society is unaware of its marginalized members, then it'll self-destruct. So that's my analysis. A quick recap. First, what I did is I told you the story of Actaeon and Diana from Ovid. I showed you a clip from the Metamorphoses film. Then I told you about Genesis. And then I compared the scene in the scene in the movie with Genesis. And finally, I told you about my interpretation of that scene. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching if you've come this far. If you liked it, leave a like. Subscribe. Have a good day.